All right, we are about a minute after the hour and we have quite a few of you here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today on this chilly Friday. We are going to be talking about Copilot Chat. So, our goal today is to discuss the security, the privacy, and all of the different capabilities of what you can do with Copilot Chat. And we will be focusing on the unlicensed experience. So if you do have a license, just know we won't be going over some of those advanced features today, but we will be covering quite a bit of the opportunity. I also just want everyone here to know we are going to be focusing our demonstration in a GCC cloud environment today. So if it looks a little different than your environment, just know that could be part of the reason why, but we welcome any and all questions in the chat today. So at any point, I have a fantastic team here with me from Planet that are going to help answer those questions as we go along today. So all of that being said, I'd love to introduce myself. My name's Larissa Cunningham, and I am a learning strategist with Planet Technologies on our Evolve 365 team. So I have had the amazing opportunity of working with a number of different organizations as they have implemented the access to Copilot in their environments. So if there's anything that we can focus on or clarify for you today, just let us know and we'd love to do so. And like I said, I'm joined here by a number of team members that can also help answer questions as we go along, and we'll save some time at the end for anything we didn't cover for you. So all of that being said, let's go ahead and talk about our agenda today. We are going to just start off with first focusing on a quick overview of what Copilot is and make sure we're all on the same page with our expectations of AI and Copilot's capabilities. And then we're going to talk about the access of Copilot and the interface and navigation features to look for. And then we'll get into some demonstration with some prompting and different use cases, and we'll conclude with some different tips and tricks you can try. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I do see a fair amount of you are aware you're in a GCC environment. We are going to talk a little bit about some key ways to identify which environment you're in if you're unsure. But let us know if there's any questions there. So I'm keeping my eye on the chat, but team here, if you can call out any questions we want to address right away, I would be happy to pause. All right, so I first want to just start off talking about kind of what we're trying to achieve with these new AI capabilities. AI is kind of a buzzword, and the generative tools that are coming out are very popular right now, and they're allowing us to do things like summarize those lengthy documents, help us create new and professional content for our teams or to give to our customers. And just pretty much every step of the workflow that you currently have, it can help with assistance, insight, and helping rephrase and recreate. I do want to emphasize how important it is that we ensure that we're using approved AI services, because if we don't, just due to the nature of how they're developed, we could potentially risk exposing personal or confidential data that we didn't intend to. So the great news is Copilot inherently, when you're signed in with your work credentials, is going to ensure data integrity and the normal enterprise data protection that you're used to experiencing with the rest of your application tools. Now, generally speaking, any generative AI tool is going to have two main characteristics I want to call out. The first is hallucinations. And this is the actual term for when AI produces really convincing but incorrect or inaccurate responses. It is a generative tool. It is based off of patterns and what it's learned from the rest of the information it's used. And so sometimes it pulls together what it thinks you want, and it might not completely follow the accuracy you expected. So We are still a critical component of what we're creating with AI. You are the expert in your field. You understand the scope and what you're talking about. So we always want to double check and validate what we're creating. The other element here is change. I'm sure that you've seen this, but AI, more than any of our other software or tools, is rapidly evolving, consistently improving, and truly today's experience will be the least advanced you ever use. So I'll say this again, but we have to keep a growth mindset and be willing to adapt as new features arise, as changes come through, because we're constantly going to be seeing those. So be patient with them and be patient with yourself if part of that journey is a little bit stressful in any way. So when we talk about our data, I know for many of you that is a crucial component of concern. And I want to emphasize that when you're signed in with your organization credentials, you will automatically get enterprise data protection. And there are some key ways that we can pick that out and make sure that those are happening for our conversations. But what this means is after you're signed in, your data is encrypted and it's not seen by anyone else. There is an element where some of those conversations are kept in a history for you to be able to reference back to work you've already done, but it's personally exclusive. It's not being trained or not being used to train any of the models or development of the tool itself. So it's not leaving you and it's not leaving your organization, which allows us to leverage this tool on some of that more sensitive data or topics and get the most out of our day. Now, those enterprise data protections are true across the board, but specifically for GCC environments, there are some additional security commitments that are ensured. So this is a government community cloud, and if you work for a government agency, whether that be a federal, state, or local agency, or you're a contractor that's supporting government work, but not necessarily handling defense-related data, you're very likely in a GCC cloud. So if you need to confirm, feel free to reach out to your IT team and they can always check or give you clarification in that regard. But what this means is your data not only is protected in the normal way that Microsoft tools are, but it also is ensuring it stays within US borders and data centers. It's being screened by US personnel and it's meeting much higher compliance standards such as FedRAMP High, CGIS, and other critical government operations or things that are critical for government operations. So it's a stricter data residency and there are higher personnel requirements compared to enterprise because of the US requirements here. So if anyone has questions on that, let us know, but those additional elements are in place. And what this typically means for you is that you're going to see some of the fancier or newer features coming out a little bit slower than they might be advertised. So you might hear of other organizations getting certain tools or features before you do. There's usually a close rollout time frame, but it is going to be a little bit delayed. So just keep that in mind. Now we're going to jump into a demonstration environment here in just a moment, but in order to access the regular Copilot Chat experience, one of the easiest ways is to open your preferred browser and go to m365.cloud.microsoft. And that should take you to your sign in. And once you're in, you should see that chat experience. So when we're working with this, I know many of us are going to experience a very different type of workflow. If you're anything like me, I was very used to search engines and trying to find a way to take a really big, complicated thought and shorten it into 4 or 5 words. That was great for search engines, finding those keywords. But with Copilot Chat, you can add more context and color to your conversation, and it's actually better when you do. This allows you to ask questions, make requests, start creating tailored topics for what you're actually working on. This also opens up doors for you to get a better explanation or gain insight. Maybe you're learning a new tool. All of this becomes really possible with that conversational style of engagement. So with so many tools out there, I've kind of alluded to some of this already, but why are we choosing Copilot? Copilot is pulling from the most powerful AI models that are out there right now and leveraging it in your secure environment. So it's still using those excellently trained and developed models, just integrating it into the world that you're working in. It also inherently has really phenomenal source transparency. Copilot cites all of the data sources behind its answers. And every once in a while, if I don't see that come through automatically, it's very easy to just respond and ask Copilot to cite its sources, and it will give you a new response with all of that information listed. There is also no knowledge cutoff if you have access to search the web. Now, I do want to say, I do know some organizations have disabled that particular feature, and so you might be working with the foundational model. But if you do have that access in your environment, it allows Copilot to not just use the information it was developed with, but also do real-time web searches and pull in more up-to-date information. And then last but not least, that data protection that is inherent when we're logged in with those accounts. Those conversations are encrypted, they're secure, and they're not training the model. So these are all the main reasons that we tend to focus on Copilot and why that security is there. Now, before I jump into my demo, I want to just give you a sneak peek of what to look for. When you sign in, especially on that web experience, you should see that main chat become the main window you're looking at. So that's going to have your prompt text box. You can send that prompt off. You can add different documents if you'd like to, and start chatting. That being said, if you've already started that journey, you will likely be able to join your recent conversations from the left-hand menu under the Conversations section. So your most recent chats will be listed there. You can also search this area and jump back into context you've already created. There are going to be a number of suggested prompts as well. This is great if you're still trying to get started or just looking for inspiration for what you can achieve with Copilot. So there will be suggestions underneath your main text area, and then you can search more and actually see a full prompt gallery if you'd like to. So all of that's going to be there, and we'll look at that in a moment. Now, one of the really cool things about these conversations is it is all going to be contextual. So as I start chatting with Copilot, I'm going to likely see it provide a response and realize some additional information or tweaks I want to make. I don't have to go back and give it all of my original context because it has that history of information in the chat we're talking in. So it's really great for continuing and building on ideas. That being said, I say all of this because if you change topics, I highly encourage you to start a new chat. I have had experiences where I didn't do that and it mixed topics I didn't know could be mixed. So this is really helpful to just clean that slate and make sure that you're approaching it with a new topic. So once you get there, it's very simple. You just enter your prompt and then please check those sources, especially if you're doing any research or information you're not as familiar with, and then continue the conversation. It's built to allow you to iterate. It's going to encourage you to take next steps and suggest different topics that will keep that conversation going. So I do think all of this makes sense more in real time, so I am going to come over to a demonstration space here, and I do just want to check in and see if there are any questions from the chat that we want to address. All right. Sounds like we might be caught up on the chat, but team, if you can call out any questions I might have missed. All right, so I am starting here. I put a link in the chat in case that helps you, but I am starting here from an Edge browser and this home area. So by default now, it brought me to the new chat section. And one thing I want to point out is sometimes you're able to access the Copilot chat experience from different applications. And this left-hand navigation may or may not unintentionally hide from you. So if you see this full screen version, take a look for this little square navigation icon and go ahead and expand it to see the other options that you have. So if I come down here, I see a chats area. Sometimes it displays as conversations, and I see my most recent conversations here. If you're looking for a different one that's not listed, we can go ahead and select all chats, and that gives us a searchable experience where we can put in keywords of previous conversations. But let's go ahead and come back to the main chat for right now. We'll explore that a little bit more later. And here in the middle, it's saying, how can I help? We get to start our prompts here. And if you click into the prompt area, it will actually pull up recent conversations from your history. So it's a great way to pull from prompts you've already created. We can also add different content in here. And we can reference our online sources and different things like that. So if I want to reference something from my OneDrive or a SharePoint area, I can specifically grant Copilot permission to view those files and analyze them for this chat experience. And again, all of that's secure. If you have maybe an Excel file that you downloaded or something else that might not already be in the cloud, you can upload files directly from the device that you're on. And apologies, I do see some questions saying that that link didn't work. Can you give me a thumbs up if it worked for you? And if not, I can try to put another link in the chat. All right, looks like we're doing okay then. All right, so from here, I'm going to point out a couple other things before we start prompting. And up here at the top, we are going to see options for being able to determine how deep Copilot is thinking. By default, it's usually on auto, which means that based on the context of what you prompt, it's going to decide if it can do a quick response or if it might need to take a little bit longer to give you its feedback, but it's going to search deeper and reason over more information. Right next to that, you should see a new chat icon. This is one of my best friends. We start new chats all the time. So that's where that icon's going to live. And right next to that is where we're going to see the green shield with the check mark. And that's what ensures that you are signed in with your organization and have enterprise data protection. So we can, of course, also see our profile down here in the bottom left corner. So if you click on that, it will showcase your email and which account you're signed in with. So if you don't see that green shield, this is the first place I would check. All right. So let's go ahead and actually start prompting. I'm going to start with a little bit of a fun prompt here just to start seeing what Copilot can do. And then we'll go into some more specific examples. So I'm going to start this here in my prompt area, and I'll share this in the chat as well if you can follow along. And what we're going to do is I'm just asking it to help me brainstorm a fun professional team mascot for an IT modernization program. So I'm giving it some really specific elements. I want a one-line mission statement, and these are our values and so forth. If you want to follow along, feel free to change any element of that prompt to see what kind of differs. But even if you match me exactly, your response will likely be very different. So starting here, it came back pretty quickly, and it gave me exactly what I asked for, a table with a name and a one-line mission statement. It's even explaining kind of why it did those different things. And as you scroll down, you'll notice that it asks for additional things it can do for you. So this is what I mean by Copilot encourages you to continue that conversation, and it tries to find ways to help you proactively. You'll also notice down here above my prompt text box, I have a number of contextual suggestions to keep the conversation going. So if I go ahead and select this one here and say suggest some taglines, I don't have to type anything if I don't need to. And I can just send that off and continue brainstorming here with Copilot. So very quickly, I'm getting some fun ideas that I can start to pull from. Maybe I mix and match, but if at any point it starts to generate something that maybe you don't need to see, or it's not understanding the request initially, you may have noticed it disappeared because it finished, but there was a little stop icon in my prompt area, and that allows you to stop the generation so that you don't have to wait for that, and you can just go ahead and try again.
Hey, Larissa, we have a couple of really good questions in the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah, one
All
of
right.
them is there a difference between this chat on the cloud and the Copilot desktop?
There, in general, it's just a different access point and a different user experience. You should be able to use either one and have very similar experiences with the brainstorming and feedback. So no, there shouldn't be. If you do have that desktop application enabled to just quickly open Copilot, it's just an easier entry point.
Thank you.
I also see the
Yeah, one more.
question. I have a work and web toggle in Copilot. If I have it set to work, does adding work content do anything additional, or does work setting access any work content? So that's a great question. That actually likely means you have a Copilot license, and having that work and web toggle, if you have it on work, it can access and reason over any of your internal data like your emails, your chat, and so forth. If you attach specific documents, it focuses the conversation on those documents. So yes, it does still have a benefit to specifically reference different data within your cloud, even though it already has access to it. So let me know if that answered your question, but if not, I'm happy to come back to it. Oh, awesome. Thank you for putting your name ideas here in the chat. Those are fantastic. I like seeing those come through. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and try another scenario, and we're going to focus more on how Copilot can help us. So I am changing topics, so I'm going to start a new chat here. And we're going to go ahead and ask Copilot to help me rewrite this request. And my goal here is to show you how important and how helpful it can be to give context like an audience or a perspective that you're trying to approach with. So in this case, we want to have help getting started with Copilot, but that might be very different if you're an executive sponsor, a frontline employee, or a help desk analyst. So you can change those roles if you're following along, but let's go ahead and see how different this can be. All right. So just pointing out a slight difference from our last chat, you may notice this said reasoned over 1 second. That means it actually used the think deeper experience. It went pretty quickly, so I barely noticed, but it gives you the steps it follows through as it is reasoning over your request. So I see my friendly response here, and it's saying, okay, as an executive sponsor, this is what that request might look like, and we're kicking off a secure, high-impact Copilot rollout. Our goals, our constraints, and our success metrics are going to look very different than if we scroll down and look at our frontline employee. They're going to be looking to save time, and their constraints are minimal training time, things like that. So I encourage you, if you did this, to really see how valuable it is to consider the persona or the audience that you might be working with when trying to use Copilot to leverage different perspectives. Now, a couple other fun features I want to point out while we're here is you can start to actually work directly with these responses. So I do have a copy option. After it completes its generation, you are going to see this copy response in a number of different areas. And this will copy every element of this feedback, including the conversational elements here, where if we want to continue the conversation. But one of my personal favorite features is this little pencil icon with the lines behind it. This allows us to edit in Pages. So if you're unfamiliar with Pages and maybe have explored the loop components that are available, it's very similar. But these pages essentially are standalone areas that allow you to flexibly create content. So it might mirror a Word document, but you have a lot more formatting options and a lot of flexibility to move this information around. So when I selected that option, it created a page automatically for me, gave me a split screen view, and it titled my page based off of my initial prompt. So you can absolutely change this. We're just going to say demonstration 2 here. And as I click around this page, you'll notice this 6-dot menu. This allows you to select a whole area. And in this case, I actually don't want to keep it, so I'm going to delete that portion. And we can start rearranging, moving things around. Now, I wish I had more time to show all of the cool things we can do here, but this page is something you can share with others and collaborate in. So I've now taken a conversation that started with just me and Copilot and turned it into a collaborative space. We can also, if we use the / here, we can look through a number of templates, including things like voting tables or a kind of planner style experience where we're creating tasks and assigning them. So of course, if I do want to assign this to anyone, like let's go ahead and assign this to Sarah in this case, it's going to tell me they don't have access. So do make sure to go ahead and share that with the appropriate people you want to collaborate with. When they join this page, you will see them show up at the top with their little profile icon, and it's a very live collaboration. So you'll see if they join it that their cursor is in certain areas. So it makes it really easy for a lot of people to contribute at the same time. All right, now, again, I get very excited about this area, so I'll quickly point out you can eventually turn these into Word documents that are saved to your OneDrive. And it does a lot of that manual work for you and transfers the formatting appropriately. So there's a lot of flexibility here to really move through your workflows in a different manner than you might be used to. So as we continue our conversation here, let's just go ahead and say create a one-page brief. I've closed out that page, and then I continue and I see, oh, actually, I want to add this to my page as well. This would be really helpful. So once it's done generating, I'm going to see likely some different options since I already created a page. So let's see what shows up for us. All right. So I have that copy icon. I can create a brand new page if I want to, or I can select this drop down arrow and add to a recent page. So if I click add to a recent page, I'm just going to search through the existing resources I have and select the one that I want to contribute to. If you already have this open, it likely will look like a plus icon, and you can just add to the open page you have a split screen with. So again, this makes it really easy to start to compile different information together. Now, if you're looking for those pages outside of a chat, I'll point out 2 ways you can get to them. The first is going to be this 3-dot menu, and you should see recent pages here. That makes it easy to just pull up and search for one of those. The other place it will be located is on this left-hand menu in the library area. This is where all of your historical pages will live, and if you need to adjust the names so they're easier to find, feel free to do so. right, so let's go ahead and we've done a couple of fun prompts, but let's talk a little bit more about how to effectively engage with Copilot. So context engineering is a fancy way of saying treat your AI tools like they're a new team member. When we actually approach AI as if it was a new employee on our team, a new hire, we wouldn't expect to have the historical understanding of our projects or the inherent clarity of our organization processes and folder structures and things like that. So when we take that kind of mindset into consideration, it changes the type of information we give. We want to make sure that AI has everything to do its job well. So that means we're giving it relevant information surrounding what we're trying to achieve. We're giving clear instructions. We're telling it what its task and format expectations are and defining the boundaries that it needs to stay within for it. So that is all a mindset to take into your prompting experience. So what specifically makes an effective prompt? On a very simple level, something that's really specific and detailed. I typically find that using full sentences and that instructional format really helps. And adding in the notes for your tone, your purpose, the preferred format you're looking for, etc. So on the screen here, you'll see the example, recap the findings of the article I've copied below and include the top 3 concerns. Provide the answer in 2 to 3 paragraphs and use a business tone. I hope you can imagine how much more effective that will be versus the counterpart on the other side, which is just summarize this news article. That is going to give you something back, but it's not going to be as tailored to what you truly wanted. So if we're vague and just use a few words and don't provide any context, we're very unlikely to reach the best results that we could. That all being said, there's no wrong way to approach these conversations. The best way to learn is to just get started and practice and try to use the most natural conversational language that feels comfortable for you. So thinking about prompt elements and what to include, there are a couple of key things I recommend. The first we hinted at earlier, and that is to give your AI tool a persona to approach the task with. Is it approaching this task as an expert scientist in a field, or is it a coach or a new hire that isn't as familiar with all of the internal jargon? All of this is going to change the way that we approach the task. The next element is the task itself, and this is where we're clearly stating the expectation of our outcome. So are we creating a summary or are we answering questions? Are we trying to pull through specific details? What's the expectation here? Format is very closely tied to the task itself, but it's not always inherently stated, and sometimes it's assumed. So I highly recommend being very explicit about the format you're expecting. Are you putting together an email, or are you putting together a report or a summary that's a bullet list or a table? All of these different types of formats enhance how quickly that final result can be taken away. Now, I think of this very closely in relation to the persona, but not only do we want to consider how we're approaching the task, we want to consider who's going to be using that information. You will likely have chats that are just for you and you're the audience, and so therefore that's perfectly fine. But there might be other times when you need to cater something to your leadership or have something that is understandable by highly technical team members. Those are going to engage different verbiage, different complexity, different lengths, and so forth. And then last but not least, I recommend explaining the tone that you're going for. Many times when we're doing writing with Copilot, it will offer to make tone adjustments, but I've found that many of the things that I create require a complex layering of multiple tones together. So I might be doing something professional and I want it to be direct, but I also need it to be sympathetic, or any number of other combination of things. There are plenty of unique scenarios that you're all faced with every day, and this can really improve how the sentiment comes across. So if we include all of these points, your prompt could look something like this, where we're filling in the blanks and saying, think like this persona, create a specific task, and then format it as, let's say, a PowerPoint presentation. So if you fill all of these elements in, it could look, we'll give a marketing example here where we're a brand manager, but even at this point, when you filled all of those details in, you might still find there's more information still to share. And that's perfectly okay. This is just a starting point. So when we take that approach, we can try a lot of different things. We're not going to be able to do everything today, but we can kind of start this. So I'll leave this here for just a moment, but I'm going to switch over and actually start a workflow that might be beneficial to start seeing. So whether you're summarizing something or outlining a brand new workshop, or maybe you're using it to help you with analysis, there are so many different ways to start incorporating this chat experience. So I'm going to come back here. We're going to go up to our chat here on the side. And before I jump in, I do just want to pause and see if we've had any other questions from the chat.
We do have a couple.
All right, awesome. So I see one that says, can Copilot recognize a photo with text and answer questions? Specifically in the GCC environment, I don't believe photos are currently supported as some of the content you can add. I'm hoping that comes in the future, and that is just one of those spaces where we have to remember it's constantly developing. So it's a great use case. I don't believe photos specifically are going to be a supported file type. All right, and then I see the question, can we show again how I got to pages, editing, and sharing choices? Yes, I will. I'll do that with this example here in just a moment. So we're going to go ahead and say that I'm an IT director who specializes in cybersecurity. And again, I'll put this in the chat if you want to test this and follow along if you're able to. And we're just going to say we're implementing a new bring your own device policy for our organizations, and we want to make sure that we're keeping our data security and compliance with company standards. So I'm just asking it to help me with this draft, and we're going to send that off. So I will say it's thinking deeper, because I can quickly select get a quick answer if I want to. It's responding pretty quick, so I didn't need to go ahead and select that. But if it's ever taking too long and you see that option and you just want some quick feedback, feel free to see how that response works for you. All right, so we're going to scroll down a little bit, and it's saying, responding to me like a person would, and then saying, here's a quick overview of what that could look like. It's outlining a purpose, scope, definitions, and so forth. So just to re-show how we can start to pull this into the next step of our development, when I get all the way to the end, I will emphasize, please read this. Again, you are the expert in the field, but I want to be sensitive of your time today. So I'm quickly scrolling through, but you would want to double check all of this. So it even gave me an appendix at the end so that I can include that as part of the considerations. And if I get all the way to the bottom, it's still pulling through some of its feedback. So it does really try to anticipate a lot of the needs that you'll have, especially when you tell it the purpose of what your end goal is. So it's taking all of that into consideration and realizing what my next steps might look like. So let's get all the way to the bottom, and to edit in Pages, this is where I'm going to look for that pencil icon with the lines behind it. If you want to add it to a previous page you've created, this drop-down menu is here, but this is a new topic for me. So I'll go ahead and select Edit in Pages, which gives me this split screen view. And sometimes it takes a moment. So it had a title here. I'm going to change this to BYOD policy. to make it easier for me to find in the future. And you can tell up here my title changed. So as far as the sharing options and so forth, we can edit as is. You can move things around. You can add different templates in here. To share this, you're going to select the share icon in the top right-hand corner. And you can either share a link where we adjust the access to this page based off of the security level of the topic. And just make sure to look at those settings to ensure you're not unintentionally oversharing. The other option with sharing that gets me really excited is this copy component, because what it does is it actually takes this full page and kind of gives this preview opportunity. We still have control over who has access, but if I specify the different people that can access this, I can actually paste a preview of this into a Teams chat and have people respond directly in the Teams chat without ever having to leave and open a new window. So there are some really cool collaboration options here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this now. We're going to continue on our conversation. I'll highlight here that you'll notice these suggestions are very different based off of our topic here. So I'm now going to say, this is great. And I want to actually start pulling through some of the information from our organization, because this was generic based off of it didn't pull from any data other than what it has learned. So I'm going to actually go ahead. Sorry, that was the same one here. That's not very helpful. All right, so we're going to continue this on, and I'm going to say thanks for the outline, and I want it to help me implement this into our existing area. So there's two ways I can actually add documents because I want to be more specific here. If I do a /, it does allow me to search through my online content, and I can just start typing in the title. So we're going to say Pentoso, I'm looking for these IT policies. Again, you can select this plus icon and search through it. It gives you a very similar experience. What does happen here, though, is it's going to take that and specifically grant access to Copilot to view this information. So it's not going to have access to any other work data. It's just giving me a quick resource. All right, I see the question for how about long scanned documents? Can Copilot process it and pull some of that summary? So if that scanned item is a PDF, that is one of the supported document types. So you can use PDFs to reason over them, pull information, search through, and get summaries and so forth. So that is something you can attach here. All right, so we're going to pull through here. And the first thing I want to point out is this immediately is different because the first one that came through was very generic. This one is pulling through things like pulling my company name from that IT document, and we're able to actually scroll through this and see more specifics that were tied to the document I added. Now, I know you're not familiar with that document. However, as you're scrolling through, if you were able to attach something in your chat, you may notice these little number icons after sections of information. Those are the source transparency links that will show you where it got that information so that you can validate and verify. So if I scroll down here, I'm seeing it's pulling everything in general from these IT policies, but if it had searched the internet at all, those links would be here as well. And if we scroll all the way to the very bottom, it will be pretty boring because it's just pulling from this one document, but you will see a full citation of anything it's searched. So if I click this down arrow, in this case, it's just my single document. But again, if it had pulled from other web sources, it would have listed those here as well. All right, so I do want to just go ahead and share a couple of just items to think about and remember, and then we'll show a couple additional topics and save some time for questions. So getting started with prompting, there are so many things you can do, and I just realized I didn't show you where that prompt gallery was for inspiration, so I'll do that as soon as we get back to that screen. But I want to suggest a couple of things that I have personally tried and used pretty consistently as ways to improve my feedback. So, no matter how good we get at prompting and how great we are at building that context, I have found that sometimes there are just certain things that don't occur to me to say. So, posing the question after you build your story with Copilot and saying, ask me 5 questions that will improve your response, or ask me 5 questions to tailor XYZ, is going to give your AI tool the opportunity to come back and get and share areas you might not have considered adding. So I've done this a lot, both in my professional and my personal experiences, and this is one of my favorite ways to enhance how tailored my feedback is. I also very frequently encourage it to give me multiple options, especially when I'm brainstorming and trying to come up with new ideas, rather than saying, help me come up with a fun topic. I'll say, help me come up with 5 fun topics on this thing. And then I go through and pick and choose and often pull together different elements that I actually think make the best final result. We can also ask it to show its work, and I will say it's still a generative response, but it's going to give you insight into the process that it went through or the logic that it followed in order to give you that response. And so it just gives you another opportunity to critically analyze what Copilot is sharing with you and help you validate it. We can also use it to create FAQs. If you're not using existing data, I will say these are anticipated questions, but it can give you a really good head start. And sometimes as the audience of who you're trying to share this information with, it can be an easier way to consume it. Sometimes it makes more sense to see a question and answer format than try to fully understand more technical language in a formal document. You can also use a approach called meta prompting, where we have the tools we're working with us help us create our prompts. Let's say you're trying to do some data analysis and you kind of know the end result, but you don't know the best way to phrase that prompt. You can start off with a conversation and say, hey, I'm looking to do some financial forecasting for the next year and help me come up with some data analysis prompts. And this is where I would use that. Give me 5 examples or something in that regard. And you can then start to see how those are crafted and tailor it for your situation. Ask clarifying questions is very similar to the previous one we talked about, but a slightly different approach. And turning large tasks into smaller tasks is typically how I recommend approaching Copilot. I know many people are very skilled at creating some of the longer in-depth prompts, and they're very impressive to see. And sometimes they come out with really phenomenal results. That being said, because I personally like to verify and validate each step of my process, I like to keep my tasks as small as I can so that I have oversight over every element that's being reasoned over and every portion that's getting put together. So this also just helps take some of those more overwhelming topics and keep them approachable and feasible as a step-by-step process. So I'll jump back over to my demo space here in just a moment and then turn time over to questions. But all of us are trying to keep up with the rapidly changing AI tools. And I just want to focus on a growth mindset and not a perfection mindset. The more we leverage these tools, the more we start to see opportunities it can enhance what we're currently doing. And even though it's a completely different way of approaching things we might be used to doing in a different way, it offers so many opportunities. So I encourage you to test out and see what's possible and be patient as progress continues with this tool. So I'm going to come back over here just quickly because I want to make sure I show you that prompt gallery. So I will start a new prompt, new chat here. And down here is where we see some suggestions. There is a see more option. And if we open that up, it gives us even more inspiration and offers a prompt gallery. So this will pop up. You can search through it based off of the task you're looking for or the job type you have and get inspiration for how we can start to leverage these tools. And if you like one of them, go ahead and select that bookmark icon to save that prompt, and it will store to this second tab at the top underneath your prompts. So you can see Microsoft has several prompts that I have saved here. You can also save your own by simply hovering over the prompt you've sent to Copilot and saving it. So if I jump back into this conversation, for example, once it loads, I would come in to my prompt itself. And when you hover over it, that bookmark icon is here as well. And we can title it whatever makes sense here and save it to that same area. So whether you're starting a new chat or continuing an existing conversation, you can get to those prompts in your gallery and use them in the existing conversation. All right, I do want to turn some time over here to your questions. So please feel free to use the raise your hand feature or continue putting them here in the chat. And while we're waiting to see those pop up, I just want to say, as an organization, we have helped so many people launch Copilot with confidence. And so if there's something that our team or Planet can do to help you, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to see what options are available. So the floor is all yours. What questions do you have?
Larissa, we have a question in the chat. Can Copilot draw an object based on the prompt?
So it can generate images, depending on how you define draw. It can generate images. So if we come in here and I'm going to use a silly prompt because it's what's at the top of my head for simplicity. I'm just going to say, create an image of a poodle in a bubble bath with a bow tie. So that's a very simple prompt. It can generate the image for me. The more information you give, the better. If there's a color scheme where you need it in a sketch format because you're looking for a drawing or things like that, the better description you can give it, the better this result is going to be. But yes, it can generate images. Did we miss any other questions from the chat?
Looks like we have another one. Can prompts be saved for use for a team?
A great question. So not inherently to be shared directly with a team, but yes. So after this finishes generating, hopefully it gives me that bow tie I asked for, and hopefully this gives you some insight into how quickly those pictures can come through. But when we save them, we should be able to share them as well. So what we can do is up here at the top, I have to wait for it to finish. If we have questions on the image generation, oh, it finished. It finished for me just because it knew I was going to have it stop. We're so close. Okay, so I keep holding my breath thinking it's done. When we come up here to the top, there is that save icon. Right next to it, you can actually copy a prompt link and share this with internal colleagues. I typically haven't needed to manage this access, but you can go in and stop sharing those links at any time. But this is the way I would recommend sharing some of those prompts. We'll just copy that link, determine who has access, and paste it so that other people can utilize the same thing. All right, is there a microphone option for talk type? I think talk to text. Let me double check because I haven't seen that on my experience, although I do know some of those features should be coming. So as of right now, what I would personally do, even though it's not inherently in Copilot, I believe, let's see if it's, oh, here we go. If you have some of your accessibility features turned on your computer, this is not letting me close it. You can actually, while you're in that prompt area, activate your microphone. My shortcut was Windows H. Might be different on yours, but that does give you that speech to text and would allow you to hopefully incorporate that same idea where you can just talk to Copilot for what you're trying to achieve. All right. Any other questions? Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for that feedback. I'm glad it was a helpful opportunity to get started. So if there are any other questions that you have or that we didn't get a chance to address, please let us know. But otherwise, I will just go ahead and thank you all for your time. I know it's very valuable. And again, if there's anything that we can do, please let us know. I'll put some contact information here in the chat if that's helpful for you. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again.